All right, here is the part 2 of the Let's Talk Shakespeare, where I was talking about the books that I read in my Shakespeare and Race class in my last semester of college. In the first video, I talked about The Merchant of Venice, Comedy of Errors, and Othello. In this video, I'll be talking about Titus, Andronicus, and The Tempest, which are the last two books that we read. I tried to make it all in one video, but I don't have enough storage on my phone, so I'm figuring out that issue right now. So the video did cut off, so I do apologize for that, but here's a part 2. Gives you a little break in between. Again, I'm Zoe. This is my channel, A Year in Books with Zoe, where I talk about the books that I've read. Right now we're going over the books I read in 2022 because I have not finished any books for 2023 yet. I want to talk about a couple more classes I did readings in, but I'll get to those at another time, and then I'll also talk about books that I have read just for fun. So let's get into Titus Andronicus. First and foremost, I will say that Titus Andronicus is an extremely gory play. There's lots of murder, lots of death, lots of violence. There is pretty graphic rape and mutilation following that rape, so that's just something to be aware of, maybe before I even talk about this, and also before you read or watch the play. So we have our characters: Titus Andronicus, who is a Roman general, his daughter Lavinia, a couple of his sons, many of which are dead, his grandson, young Lucius, and Marcus Andronicus, his brother. We also have Saturninus, who ends up being the emperor, his brother Bassianus, Tamara, queen of Goths, her sons Demetrius and Chiron. She has another son to begin with, but he dies, so whatever. And then we have Aaron the Moor, who is Tamara's lover. As I mentioned in the other video, during the time period that Shakespeare wrote this play, Black actors would not have been performing at the Globe. The actor who played Aaron the Moor, who is a Black man, would have been a white man in blackface. So that is something to keep in mind. So we start off with Tamara, queen of Goths, and her sons, and Tamara is begging for her son Alarbus, who is the one I didn't mention before because he died, not to be killed, but Titus does not care and has him like ripped apart. Then he proceeds to decide who will be emperor, and he chooses Saturninus, despite Bassianus being preferred by the Romans. He then tries to offer up his daughter Lavinia to Saturninus for marriage, but Lavinia has already promised her hand to Bassianus, and then his sons kind of like go against him. He kills one of his sons. It's a whole thing. It works out for Saturninus anyways, because he was sexually attracted to Tamara and wanted to be with her. The reason he likes her so much is because she's white, very, very pale whites, as opposed to Lavinia's like brown Roman skin, like tan brown Roman skin. And so he finds like the white skin very like voluptuous and sexy, etc. And then we kind of go on. There's a hunt, and during the hunt, Tamara is hooking up with Aaron in the woods when Lavinia and Bassianus stumble upon her. They are pretty quickly like, this is not gonna work, and so Aaron has her sons kill Bassianus, and then convinces them to later rape Lavinia. And then following that rape, they cut out her tongue and her hands so that she cannot tell anybody who did this to her. Then a little bit later on in the play, Tamara gives birth to Aaron's son, who is born black, and so she sends the child to Aaron to be killed. And then Aaron makes a speech in defense of the child, which is sometimes considered the first Black Power speech, where Aaron is kind of talking about how great Black is, and how it's better than white, how it hides kind of like your emotions. But again, everyone just kind of ignores him, just like what happened in The Merchant of Venice. Aaron still is able to save his son from being murdered. He puts another child who has a black father, but who the child appears to be white, in place of his son to become the emperor's heir. And then, you know, continues on with life. Then Lavinia comes, and Titus realizes that, you know, this horrible thing has happened to her, and she can't really communicate it with them. Then Tamara and her sons go to Titus and pretend to be, I don't even remember, like, revenge and some other, like, random things, and are like, oh, he'll never know it's us, and Titus instantly knows it's them. And so Tamara leaves, but she leaves her sons with Titus, and Titus kills them and bakes them into a pie that he later feeds to Tamara. And then we get to the end of the story. He feeds it to Tamara. Everyone gets murdered. Yeah, that's it. It's a lot of just like murder and gore. But it is interesting because you see like very different sides of the spectrum. You see pure white and then black, and then you have like Romans in the middle, which are supposed to be like the mild middle point, where like the very pure white goth woman Tamara is highly sexualized, highly sexual. The Romans are very like moderate, and then even Aaron is less like sexual and sexualized than Tamara is. So that's just something interesting. I actually wrote my last essay in the class on this book and on kind of like the racial aspects of their child, of Tamara and Aaron's child, and then also of Tamara herself. It's definitely something really interesting to look at if you're gonna do like kind of like a deep dive into that kind of racial structure. I would recommend checking out the book. It's just really like violent. That's the main thing. It's really violent. The whole beginning is really difficult to follow because of all the violence that's happening, and you're just like, wait, what? Because everyone is just like getting killed. All right. The last book that we read is The Tempest, which is a pretty interesting book. Let me just flip to our character list. All right, so our main character here is Prospero, who is the former Duke of Milan. He gets stranded on this Mediterranean island with his daughter Miranda. On this island, he finds Ariel, who is like a spirit of an unknown gender, maybe like a fairy, maybe a spirit, unsure. And then Caliban, who is an inhabitant of the island, and also the the son of a black witch. And so Caliban's race is never specifically stated. He's mostly described as like a half fish, half human type creature. He's described in very monstrous senses, but given who his mother was, given that they talk about his father as like a devil, it is believed that he is a black coded character. However, if you look at the plays, if you look at the movies, you'll see him depicted very differently depending on the director's interpretation of him. Anyways, he is a servant to Prospero. He helped them at first when they moved on the island, and then he was put into servitude. And Prospero has like some kind of powers where he can like torture Caliban without being there when he doesn't do what he wants. All right, and then we have Ferdinand, who is the Prince of Naples, which is where Prospero and Miranda came from. And Prospero set up the scheme to get the prince to fall in love with Miranda. And then there's Alonso, the king of Naples, Antonio, who is Prospero's brother, and took over his position as Duke of Milan, and then like a couple other people. I think Trinculo and Stefano are like servants, and they later will find Caliban on the island. So Ferdinand comes, and Prospero puts him into servitude, doing hard labor like he had Caliban doing? And Ariel has set up this whole scheme. He like makes the ship crash, puts all this confusing stuff so that these people are set into this situation to fall into what Prospero wants to happen. So anyways, he puts Ferdinand into this position of servitude, and like Miranda and him are instantly attracted to each other, and they're talking about how they're willing to be servants because they love each other so much. And so it's really like juxtaposing their opinion on servitude versus Caliban's, where like Caliban's kind of demonized for his complaining, and they're kind of like praised for it being like service of love. And Caliban kind of like wanders off, and then he finds a Trinculo and Stefano, and they decide that they're going to take over Prospero. And while they do that, it never really happens. They get put right back into their rightful position. Prospero gets put back into his rightful position. Ariel is released from his servitude. And so the big thing about this is because the race is not specified, a lot of it has to do with servitude. And, you know, some people will interpret it as like black bodies versus native bodies versus white bodies. Totally up to you how you want to like see it. But it definitely is interesting, the way that everything is kind of like demonized. Yeah, it's I finished this play and I was very confused what the message was supposed to be. And this is one of Shakespeare's last plays too, so Prospero kind of gives a speech at the end asking to be like released, and some people interpret that as like Shakespeare speaking through Prospero to his audience to be released. Overall, I really enjoyed this class. I think that it's really important to think critically about the things that we're reading, about the media and art that we're consuming, because there are racial undertones, there are sexist undertones. You know, we really need to understand what kind of things we're consuming, because it does affect how we are interacting in the world, even if we don't realize it does. So I just really appreciate this class because it really pushed me to ask questions, and to, you know, look past the surface level of these books. So if you get a chance to take a class like that, I really recommend it. It made me look at Shakespeare a lot differently than I did before, and kind of realize that sometimes we can be really blind to the racist, sexist, etc. aspects of things, and we really need to, you know, try to open our eyes to that. I think we can read for pleasure, but I think that we also have to read critically. Anyways, that is my full review of the books that we read in that class. Please let me know if you want me to do anything else like this, and I will be back with more book reviews soon. Thanks!